Another story that just went totally unreported that hit Breitbart. Bank records reveal Saudi elites gave millions to Boston Marathon bombers' mosque. The Zarnev boys, one of whom is dead now, the other currently on trial for terrorism charges from his role in the Boston Marathon bombings, was known to pray at the Islamic Society of Boston, the mosque in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which according to this report was founded by an al-Qaeda operative and funded with money from Saudi Arabia. Newsweek magazine reporting that the Zarnev brothers became radicalized after they started attending this mosque, but not a word in the mainstream press. That's what happens to these stories. They'll come out. People will say, well, why would the mainstream media talk about something like that if it's just going to expose them? But you have to realize that there's an old saying in marketing where you have to hear something 7 times for it to stick. And a story can come out in an obscure magazine, or it can come out even in a semi-popular magazine, but repetition is how you form and shape and fashion the masses. So you have to put it out over and over and over and over and over. And it needs to have the vibe that somehow you're superior and the other person is not, and somehow they are inferior to you. And it's very easy to believe that. Our minds want to believe that. We want to already believe that we're better than other people. I think it's part of the human experience. It's unfortunate, perhaps, because it's a sign of hubris or pride, but it is nevertheless hard to deny that we all desire to have that thought that we are better than other people. And all throughout history, we see this. I mean, here in America, white people thought they were better than black people. White people thought they were better than red people. In other areas, black people think they're better than others. In other places, red people think they're better than others. And this is just a part of the human experience. And unfortunately, it's been such a part of the human psyche that the marketers of this evil in Washington are able to manipulate that amongst the American people and get them to think that they are superior. Same thing that we saw in Nazi Germany, same thing we saw in fascist Italy. It's no different. All throughout history, you see the same MO used and employed by the people at the top, although with variations along the way. But in essence, always appealing to that same primal instinct that I'm superior and you're not. And governments have learned how to play this very, very well and leverage it and use it against the populations to get their support for whatever they want to support, for any country they want to target. And the U.S. has been extremely proficient at manipulating the American people, its population, in coercing it to do what it wants, to help it, support, where it would be against Iran, but for Saudi Arabia. You've really got to think about how clever that is. How did the U.S. get? How did they make that happen? How do they get all the public angry about Islamic jihadism, but they're buddies with Saudi Arabia? Isn't that bizarre? I mean, you really got to hand it to the marketers in Washington and the mainstream media that's corporate controlled by 6 multinational corporations. You've really got to give them a hand, because they have been able to manipulate the people's mind of this country so much to the point where they fear radical Islamic jihadism, and they want to take down Iran and prevent that country, which doesn't have any nuclear weapons and is completely surrounded by countries that have nuclear weapons and lives in a neighborhood that is probably the most dangerous on earth and desires to have nuclear weapons like all of its neighbors. It's a very natural desire. And somehow America has been able to convince us that that person who has no nuclear weapons needs to be preemptively struck. Basically, Iran says, look, I live in this neighborhood, but I want to have a gun too. Everybody else has a gun. I want to have a gun. And all the guys who have guns look at the guy who doesn't have a gun and say, no, we don't trust you with a gun. And he says, well, I don't trust you either without a gun, right? And it's a circular argument. But the guys who have the guns say, no, we're right, you're wrong, we don't want to hear anything about it, or we're going to shoot you, right? And this is where we are. This is the madness that has been promoted to us through the corporate-controlled mainstream media. They are trying to form and fashion the Middle East according to their tastes and preferences, and they're using you and your support to do it. You're a pawn on this global chessboard. They want you to march to their orders. They want you to march to their beat.